feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
I'm Cherylanne Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. Hello and welcome. You're listening to episode 48 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. And today we are kicking off something brand new. This is a 4-part finance series, kind of new for us, but I'm pretty excited about this content and what we're going to be sharing over the next 4 weeks. So 4 different episodes on 4 different facets of financial mindset. So why am I doing this? Why on a podcast that's really about balance and priorities and purpose are we talking about finances? It might seem like it's coming in a little bit from left field, but here's why. One of the biggest barriers that I see in my work to women achieving their full potential, the work they are here to do, the legacy that they are meant to live, is actually finances. And maybe not for the reasons you think at first blush. This really isn't about finances getting in our way because we don't have the money to pursue what we want to do. It's not really about a lack of actual finance resources. It's really about how we think about money, or sometimes how we don't think about money at all, right? And that is the pattern of thinking that gets in our way. So what we're going to do in this 4-part series is break down a few different financial mindsets and help you examine how they might be showing up in your life, what kind of impact they might be having on your thinking or on the decisions that you're making, so that you can see for yourself if any of these are in fact in your way. All right, and we're going to kick that off today talking about financial fear. So when I say that phrase, financial fear, I want you to think about where does it land in your body? How does just the phrase alone make you feel? Do you get a little constricted in your gut? Do you feel a tightness in your throat? Do your hands or shoulders clench up a little bit when I talk about financial fear? And if any of those responses are happening, or even if you just kind of flush with a little extra heat when you hear the phrase, that I want to pay attention to that today. So financial fear, in the context that we're going to come at this, you might use the phrase scarcity mindset to get at this. So if you've heard anything about scarcity thinking or scarcity mindset, that's really what we're going to talk about. And this is a phrase that really Stephen Covey coined back in the day in one of his early books, and provided it in that case as a framework for looking at scarcity of any kind. You might have a belief that there's not enough of something. In this case, we're going to talk about money, but you can have a scarcity mindset as it relates to time, or as it relates to love, or as it relates to just about anything in life. And it can cause some really sort of warped behavior patterns. So today, that one that we're going to get into is, scarcity mindset as it relates to money. And the core belief here is that there is not enough. So questions run through your mind. Will I have enough if I make XYZ choice? Or how do I hold on to the resources I do have? There can be this sense of, tightly gripping the resources that you've already been able to amass. Questions like, what would I do if I lost it? Or if I lost everything? Questions like, why don't I have more? Why don't I have more money? Or why does she have more? This envy vector of why does somebody else have more? So scarcity mindset is really rooted in that belief that there is not enough to go around, that you don't have enough to do what it is that you want to do. And this is a really important point. It doesn't necessarily have to be real. as in you cannot put food on the table or pay for your home or put gas in the car. Scarcity mindset, this financial fear, can be rooted in a perceived shortfall, right? So maybe something like the stock market is down or the real estate market is depressed, or you've experienced some sort of setback financially in your household. And even though there really is plenty of money still left, it feels like there's scarcity, right? Maybe the balance in a particular account is dwindling. And every time you see that number, in your online dashboard, it kind of hits you in the stomach. So this scarcity mindset sounds like maybe it's not a big deal, right? It's just in your head. If it's not real, maybe it's not a big problem. But this particular fear can really cost you. It has a pretty substantial opportunity cost in causing you to not take actions that could be good for your long-term financial health. Being gripped by this fear that there isn't enough right now can actually cause you to take actions that reinforce that state. They make it worse instead of better. So that's what we want to dig into today is what are those patterns of behavior that you fall into when you're being governed by financial fear. And there's 3 that I want to talk about today. The first one is having a lot of financial fear or really being hung up in this scarcity thinking can trap you in your comfort zone. Now, here's the thing. Your comfort zone, right, is simply what you already know how to do. So it may actually be pretty uncomfortable in there, right? You might be not living in the home you want to be in. You might not be able to buy things that you want to buy. You might not like the job that you're in, but you're comfortable because it's what you already know. So financial fear essentially keeps you playing small. You won't take any risks because the belief that there's not enough of anything makes you feel like any potential to lose even a small amount of money is not worth it. There's this very strong fear of losing that's associated with financial fear. But guess what? Losing is just a part of life. The facts are that you will lose sometimes. You'll have a business deal that goes sideways, or you'll have an unexpected expense that comes up that you have to cover, or you'll go to sell a home and you won't get the price that you wanted for it, right? Something as it relates to money will not work out. But overreacting to that, acting like there's something wrong with you when that happens, that can be disastrous because as soon as you view it as like, oh my gosh, this is this alarming, unexpected event, this is catastrophic, then you go into essentially fight or flight thinking. And we're going to talk in a minute about just how dangerous that fight or flight mechanism is, right? When you act like this unexpected financial loss or event is catastrophic, it can really send you into a tailspin. So when you're standing inside your uncomfortable comfort zone, right? I don't love the way my life is. I don't feel like I have enough, but I am so terrified of losing even anything, even a small amount of money, that I can't step outside this comfort zone. What happens? You just continue to reinforce your current circumstances, right? And so we'll say things like, I feel stuck. I just can't get past this. It's always been this way. I can't imagine how it will ever change. All of that, all of those kinds of messages are really this reinforcement that, I would just prefer to stay tucked in here in my comfort zone, not changing anything, because the fear of loss outweighs the opportunity for potential gain. Okay, and can you see how scarcity thinking, this financial fear, is really what's governing and dictating those choices? It's the tape that's playing in your head that is giving you permission to not make any moves that could actually take your life to the next level. You're just reinforcing the current state over and over and over again. So that's the first one. And it's a pretty big deal because if we do what we've always done, right, it stands to reason we will get the results we have always gotten. And what we're looking for here are different results. We're looking for a way to reach that next level. So we're going to have to do something we've never done before. That's the first piece, staying in your comfort zone. The second issue with being really ensnared by financial fear is that it sets up and reinforces a blame game. It's a pretty ineffective blame game, but you can get into this pattern of finger pointing. So when scarcity mindset is strong, your focus will be on finding someone to blame instead of controlling what you can control. So you'll find yourself pointing the finger at pretty much everyone other than yourself. It's the economy's fault. It's the government's fault. It's someone in your company's fault. There's a lot of places it's your parents' fault that the blame gets placed of how you got to this place. This is what my husband did that got us into this situation. And now there isn't enough and there will never be enough. This is what my company did. This is what whoever. Okay. So there's this finger pointing of wanting to explain the situation. And it really causes you to be more attached to your story than you are to getting beyond it. So you'll want everyone to understand why it is the way it is. And all of the mental energy is going to having a reasonable and believable explanation for why it is the way it is. And wanting to bring other people into that explanation and make sure that they understand it. But what that's preventing you from doing, right? If you're spending all your time thinking about how this happened, how you got to this situation, what are you not thinking about? You are not thinking about how to move forward. You're focused in the rearview mirror on what happened before and how you got here and how this whole situation is terrible, but it's not your fault, instead of looking at where do I want to go? What is the future that I have envisioned for myself? And what would it take to make that possible? Instead of focusing on the actions that you want to take to move you forward, you are analyzing and overanalyzing and rehashing events gone by. And I'll tell you a story. This can happen. You can cycle in and out of this scarcity mindset. So let's say you run a business and the business is doing reasonably well, right? It's growing, it's healthy, your revenue is higher than your expenses, right? Things are feeling pretty good. And you're starting to feel, a sense of confidence about the future of the business. So I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and that is the state we want to be in, right? We want to be in a place where revenues, higher expenses, we've got a profitable business, and we're focused on moving forward. What happens when you have a bad quarter or a bad month or a bad 6 months? When you have a bad quarter, it can flip you back into a scarcity mindset, into financial fear. And often I will talk to an entrepreneur who is in the midst of one of those downturns. And what happens is that they are immediately focused on looking backwards at how that happened. Now, there's a bit of that that's healthy because you want to make sure it doesn't happen again, but they can get so focused on the numbers in the spreadsheets and what happened with certain customers or somebody who didn't pay a bill or somebody who reneged on a contract, that the next thing you know, they're not focused on selling the next customer, developing the next product, building a better marketing plan, right? All of the things that could pull their business forward and climb out of the after effects of this downturn, they're not doing, because they're busy looking backwards at everything that's already happened. Okay, so that's an example for a business owner, but you can find the parallel to that in your own life. If you're spending all of your time looking backwards at whose fault is this, how did this happen, you're not focused on what you can do to move forward and change the situation. So we talk a lot in my breakthrough program about agency mindset. Agency mindset is controlling what you can control, right? Taking ownership over the things that you actually can affect, which is the opposite of victim mindset. And so this whole financial fear situation can really keep us in a victim mindset where we are playing a blame game that is not getting us anywhere.
feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
So that's the second issue with being in this headspace is first, you're reinforcing all of the behaviors you've already done. So you're stuck in an uncomfortable comfort zone. And then you're looking for someone else to blame about how this happened instead of controlling what you can control. So the third issue with this being governed by financial fear is really maybe the riskiest. And it's that you do go into fight or flight mode. All right. So if you think about kind of that prehistoric wiring of our brain, right? Fight or flight is that survival mechanism. And when our financial livelihood is threatened, or we think it's being threatened, we perceive it the same way we would perceive physical danger, right? Like a dinosaur running at us. So we go into that fight or flight mode, which radically impairs our thinking. So financial fear actually rewires your brain, and you get into a sort of tunnel vision, and you are only focused on the fact that you don't think you have enough money, right? It's all you see, it's all you think about, it's all you feel. You sort of become obsessed because this hijacks the channels in your brain that really could be used for other things like problem solving, right? Like creativity and innovation, like ideation of how you can get out of this place. But instead, all you're thinking about is like what's right in front of you, which is I don't have enough. And because of that, you can actually lower essentially your IQ, right? There's some research that was done on this, testing cognitive capacity when someone is feeling poor versus when they're feeling rich. And guess what? Being scarcity minded actually lowers performance on like an IQ test. They did this research. It's kind of interesting. I found this data. They did it on sugarcane farmers in India. And these farmers are only paid once a year, it turns out. And they're paid right after the harvest of sugarcane. So when they get that income, they're feeling pretty rich, right? They're flush with cash. So like anybody who gets that, they get really excited about spending it. So they spend it a little too fast. And then by the time they're at the end of the harvest cycle, they're back to being relatively poor. So you get this interesting research situation where you can take the same person and only about a month apart, they can be in very different states, feeling very rich and feeling very poor. And when they tested these farmers on their long-term thinking, their ability to make long-term focused decisions, they tested it when they had no money and when they had plenty of money. And guess when they made better decisions? Right? They made better decisions when they felt financially secure. So if you think about why this matters, it's like when you are not feeling financially secure, when your head is telling you, I don't have enough, you don't make good decisions because scarcity captures your mind. Essentially, that state it's like the state of having just pulled an all-nighter, like sleep deprivation. It lowers your thinking that significantly. And who wants that? Right? So the case to me for learning how to pull yourself out of that financial scarcity mindset, out of this fear-driven behavior is so important because the only way forward, the only way to really get yourself on solid financial footing is to be thinking clearly. Right? So you kind of have to go backwards up this train we've just built. The first step out of it is getting yourself to a place where you feel secure. I think of it as like getting onto a life raft, right? If you feel like you're drowning, get onto a life raft. It might not be your final resting place, but what can you do to give yourself a level of short-term security so you can catch your breath and you can start to think clearly? There's one question that you can ask yourself that I have found to be very, very powerful when you need to flip this switch quickly. Here's the question. What would I do if everything were okay? What would I do right now if everything were okay? Because when you are in that financial spiral, you don't feel like everything is okay. So you're making decisions from this place of like, I just have to survive. And so I'm making bad decisions, right? As soon as you say to yourself, what would I do if everything were okay? You go back into that headspace of security. Oh, that's what I would be thinking about. That's what I would be doing, right? I would get some sleep if everything were going to be okay. I would make sure I were well fed. I might have a conversation with, there's these very reasonable things that you know you would do if everything were already okay. So if you can do those things now, even when you're feeling a sense of financial insecurity, you start to get the results that they will bring. And that's the critical thing, right? You want to sort of behave as though everything were okay, focusing on long-term good decisions, giving yourself the opportunity to take a little bit of calculated risk so that you can move beyond your comfort zone, staying in personal agency, right? Staying out of the blame game and focusing on what you can control and the actions that you can take. That really is the train that's going to move you back to a place of level-headed thinking as it relates to your finances, right? An abundance mindset as it relates to your finances. So let's recap for a minute those big three, the three big issues or costs of carrying a heavy load of financial fear. The first one was that you stay in your uncomfortable comfort zone, right? You reinforce the things you've always done. You keep doing the things you've always done. The second issue is you get into the blame game instead of taking action, right? You'll be looking for finger pointing and whose fault is this and how did this happen instead of looking forward at what you can do to change it. And the third issue is you will not be able to think straight. Your brain will be hijacked by survival and you will make bad long-term decisions because an entire section of your brain is not available to you. So that key question that can flip you is, what would I do if everything were okay? And that's like a trigger of switch you can flip to get yourself back on that lifeboat and start thinking about stacking good long-term decisions one on top of the other so you can start to move forward. Because financial scarcity, the headspace of constantly worrying about money and feeling like there's not enough is just no way to live, right? In fact, it's quite the opposite because getting your head clear, taking responsibility, taking action to start to change the tide, and sometimes rather quickly, everything that you want is sort of lined up behind that chain of events. And this is a very common shift that we tackle inside of Breakthrough. So Breakthrough is one of my member programs. And when we're working with women who need to make this shift, often, this might surprise you, they are women of considerable financial means. This scarcity mindset is in no way limited to people who are in a low socioeconomic class. In fact, it might be as common, among people who have, they're statistically wealthy, but their headspace says they're behaving as though they're someone who has no money. And it goes the other way as well. Sometimes we're working with women who do not have strong financial means, but they've got a great head game. Right? They're really living in an abundance mindset. And so they're able to stack wins one on top of the other to take their life to the next level. So this is the opener to our finance series because I think it's the biggest pattern that I see getting in people's way, right? When you are really stuck in a pattern of financial fear, you're locked. You're locked into where you are, feeling terrified of taking any step in any other direction. And our first job is getting you unlocked so you can start trying some new things and getting some different results. That's what I want you thinking about this week. Next time when we come back, we're going to talk about assessing whether you are operating in your life as a financial child or a financial adult. So it's an interesting framework that we're going to play with a little bit, and you can figure out where you land on that spectrum based on your behaviors. And the way we're going to come at this might be different than you think. So definitely join me for that one. And also, if you got something valuable out of today's episode, I would love it if you would take a moment to review the show. We are really so grateful for the reviews that you leave on iTunes especially, but all of the websites where the podcast is available to you. But just go into iTunes or whatever other source you're using, leave a rating or a review, like this one from Four Eyes No More. She said, Cherylanne has an uncanny ability to distill life's toughest concepts into metaphors and frameworks that will make you say, aha, and take action. Highly relatable and exceptionally inspirational. So thank you to Four Eyes No More and to all the rest of you who are leaving reviews. We really, really appreciate it. I read every single one of them. That's all for today, my friends. Until next time, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.